doing a big chunk of work today. So gonna be doing a lot on this prototype right now. Gonna try to get through about 3 hours with no substantial breaks. So when last I left off, I made this little turret enemy that kind of swivels and shoots at you. And next I'm going to make it so that the player ship can actually take damage and have chunks get knocked off of it. Yeah. So let's do that thing. See if I can start off by spilling coffee down the front of me. It's for the smell more than anything else. So I'm actually going to change this to... I don't like this send message method. I want lasers to be able to trigger, to be able to collide with things anywhere. And if those things can receive damage, notify them. So I'm actually going to do so I'm going to grab a reference to the damageable component of the thing that you hit. And then if that's not null, apply damage to it. So now this should just be a cleaner way of doing this that doesn't just aimlessly search for a receiver and then trigger a bunch of these errors when it hits something that doesn't have the right component. Otherwise, those are just going to be there forever. Unless I get really picky with how I set up layers so that lasers only collide with things that can receive damage, but I don't want to have to do that either. So anyway. Where's that turret? Cool. All right, so we've got an enemy shooting at us. I think I might actually... So when this enemy just sort of aims perfectly all the time, feels a little predictable. Because, like, if we travel with a certain amount of tangent velocity, it means it just misses forever no matter what. And it makes it very predictable and kind of easy to avoid. And it just feels a little fake when enemies always have sort of perfect accuracy. So I think what I may do is actually add a tiny bit of scatter and have it sort of shoot little bursts. So it'll shoot like 1, 2, 3 lasers back to back and then a delay, and have a little bit of scatter to those. So sometimes it might accidentally shoot ahead of you or behind you or off target. Makes it a little more interesting and a little bit more to where you have to kind of predict where it's shooting. So I'm going to do that. So yeah, let's make the turret a little more interesting, and then I'll do ship damage. let's do, let's give projectile shooter So let's grab the bullet and then just apply a tiny little bit of random rotation to them to offset what direction they're traveling in. So what are the versions of this method? Okay. We don't want to rotate around the x-axis or the y-axis. What we do want to do is rotate by a random number of degrees on the z-axis within this spread. So we want to get a random value between 0 and 1. I think we want to do it like this. We're taking the random, so if we say that it has up to a 5-degree spread, we're going to generate a random number between 0 and 10, and then subtract 5 from it so that it's centered around 0. So that if we want a 5-degree random spread, this can end up being anything between -5 and +5, if that makes sense. So this will result in a tiny random spread. Let's see if this works. Turret, projectile shooter. Let's give this 90-degree random spread. Look at that. Now it has terrible aim. Beautiful. So now it can be anything within a 90-degree spread, which it looks like that's about what it's doing. Oh, 90 degrees in each direction. Yeah, so this is basically giving us a 180-degree spread. So maybe to make this clearer how it's going to work, we want to do this. So that's like 0 to 5. Let me think. If the degrees are 5, then this is a number from 0 to 5 minus 2.5. So this is a, yeah, that would be 2.5 to the left or 2.5 to the right. Yeah. So this should be right. All right, so we're giving the laser a little random offset here. Let's give it a 90-degree spread. Make it shoot 10 times faster. There we go. So that's our 90-degree spread. Looks pretty good. I'm not doing 90, just testing. I think the actual spread should be something pretty small, like that. Yeah. See how much more organic that looks now than just having it like perfectly accurate all the time. Because previously, this is how it was. And then if we just give it like a 10-degree spread, like look at that, yeah. Now especially as we get out to a distance, it starts to create kind of a broad spray. Looks a lot more organic, a lot more realistic, and a lot more interesting to try to play around, because now we can't just dodge everything by traveling at a fixed velocity. Now there's a little bit of unpredictability, so it might like accidentally spread in the direction that we're going and be better at hitting us. Now I could make this smart and have it try to lead the direction you're going, but I think that's actually worse, because you don't want the enemies to be too smart, because then you can't. The goal is not to make it so that the player can't play around the enemies. Because if we wanted to make an AI that'll just decimate you by leading with shots, we could do that, and it would be really annoying. But we want the player to feel like they can actually kind of avoid things, and so that there's some actual gameplay to do. So, all right. So now how many degrees do I want this thing to actually spread? Oof. Trying to fly back to it, but this is a little hard to control. All right. So is that a good amount of spread? Or no? If we up it slightly, is that better? I think maybe. I think maybe what we want to do, like what if we make this like 30? That seems very random now. That's probably a little too random. So just sort of eyeballing when this feels right to me. Yeah, I think that probably feels right. Now, the next thing I want to do is have this thing kind of fire in clusters. So every time this timer expires, instead of it immediately restarting so that it keeps firing at a fixed interval, I want to make it so that when it hits 0, it shoots kind of a little cluster over the course of a second or two and then resets the timer. So I think every time this timer expires, I'm going to start a little coroutine that fires a cluster. And I'm going to add float called cluster duration. Actually, I'll do cluster delay. So this is time between cluster shots, and then this one represents time between clusters. So we're going to fire cluster. Why is this errored? Oh. Actually, I don't need this out here. Okay. Boop, typo. There we go. So we start a cluster timer equal to the cluster delay. While cluster timer while shots fired equals 0. So we count how many times we shot. While shots fired is less than cluster rounds. Cluster timer minus equals time.delta time. We count the timer down by the amount of time that's elapsed. Oh, I forgot to run my timer. Hold on. I've been live for 18 minutes. Let me fix that. $8:37.58. Try that. Okay, cool. Caught that up. All right, so we're going to yield return null means just wait till the next frame. Plus equals cluster delay. And this is where we'll call gun.fireBullet. And then less than or equal to 0 seconds. We reset the timer. Fire a bullet and increment the number of shots fired. I think this is all we want. Let's give it a test. I think each cluster should fire 3 shots, and there should be a 3-second gap between rounds and a cluster delay of 0.5 seconds. So it'll go pew pew pew. Let's try this. Pew pew pew. Okay, that's pretty good, but I think I want the delay a lot shorter. I was imagining this being like shooting a little condensed burst. There we go. 1, 2, 3 shots. 1, 2, 3 shots. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. Nice. Yeah, so that's a lot more interesting. Now instead of it just continually firing a stream, it shoots in little bursts. The bursts have a little bit of spread to them. It's possible to dodge them, but you got to kind of pay attention. It's not completely predictable. Yeah, this is a lot better. Cool. All right, nice. Let's actually make the enemy turret damageable as well. Give it like 5 HP. Doesn't have a collider right now. I'm gonna wait on setting that up because I actually want to set up the turret differently before I do that. So but yeah, this is a much more interesting enemy than we had before. I gotta fix that triangle disappearing. I think I know what's happening. I think it's rotating itself upside down, but that's okay. Actually, let's look at it. That triangle disappears when we're directly below it. Oh, it's not what I thought. I assumed it was like flipping upside down or something, but it isn't. Circle. That is strange. This is closer to the camera than the circle, but it's rendering behind it. I think I need to use actual sorting layers with these sprites, which is fine. Set up background. Set up Objects. I'll just do 3 layers for now. So objects will be things like the ship body. Background will be things that we want to pass behind them. Foreground will be like features on top of the ships and stuff like the triangle and whatever. So let's try this. Enemy turret, triangle, render in front. Foreground, circle, default. Let's try this. See if it'll always render in front now. Yep, fixed it. It's like when you do things the right way, they work. Some of the time. Okay. Cool. I think I actually like those bigger, chunkier looking lasers. I'm going to make the player's lasers look like that, but red. Just going to copy the green laser. Make it red. Whoops. Forgot to assign it to the gun. See how this looks. Nice. So I don't think I need... Actually, I think I want the player lasers to travel a little faster. It feels bad to play. You want the enemy lasers to travel a little slow so that you can avoid them. You want the player lasers to travel fast so that they feel like they have control over where they're shooting. So I'm going to make those travel at like 40 instead. And yeah. Try this. Gun, gun. Yeah, that feels pretty good. Okay. So, let's get some damage on the player ship. Going to go to the restroom. Take the overlay, and I'll be right back. All right, let's continue. Check my stream settings real quick, make sure I'm on the right category. Second guessing if I remembered to set it. Okay, yeah, I did. Cool. All right, so player ship damage. Why does the timer sometimes count up by multiple seconds at once? That's a little weird. A little bit of lag going on there. Weirdness. Okay. So, give it a gun, give it a gun. All right. So every player ship part should be damageable. Thinking if I have these ship parts made out of a bunch of different sprites, I want them all to flash when they take damage. So I'm thinking about how to make that little damageable flash animation affect all of the ship parts. Because right now it let's do this. Let's give him multiple animators. That's one way to fix it. It's probably a cleaner way to fix it, but let's do this for now. Let's fix the asteroid. Give a reference to its animator. Get the enemy ship. That's not damageable yet. Okay. Double check that this works. It should work. Didn't change that much. Put a gun on the ship. Put a gun on the ship. Yeah. No errors. All right. So, damage to the player ship. We want each piece of the ship to be damageable. We'll give them, say, 5 HP or something. And then I'm going to take the animator that is on the asteroids and stuff. Put it on all the ship parts. Prefab ship connector. Okay. Give this a reference to that animator. I'm gonna rename this damageable. I don't think that'll break anything. I don't think it cares about the names. But we'll find out if I'm wrong. And then I want to add the same setup to the gun components. Triangle and the square. Both need an animator to flash them when they take damage. And then the gun needs to be damageable. And we'll give it 5 HP as well. And give it a list of those animators so that it can flash everything it needs to when it gets hit. Square, triangle. Now, the other thing is the damageable component needs to have a collider on it. Otherwise, it can't ever be hit by anything. I could make the damageable script require a collider so that when you add that script, it'll automatically put a collider on the thing, but I think I don't want to do that because I can imagine a scenario where things are damageable, but only if we explicitly want to apply damage to them. I think 99% of the time we're going to want a collider on them, but I'll still do it manually just so that we're not tied to doing that. I can imagine having a part of a ship that like can't be hit by projectiles, but if you're driving through a big AoE or something, it might take damage over time. Something along those lines. So I will put a box collider on the gun. That looks good. Do the same thing for the connector. And then for all these ship parts, I'm going to, yeah, I guess I'll leave them on default layer for now. Ooh, things are bumping into each other now. Nice, check that out. Parts of the ship being blown away. Got no effects on it yet, but it's working. Okay, so a couple of things I'm thinking of here. One, when a piece gets destroyed from the ship, it can't just destroy itself because the ship has references to it. It's occupying a slot on the ship. The ship needs to be notified when a piece gets destroyed. So instead of damageable things just destroying themselves automatically, they're going to need to send an event somewhere that handles what to do when they get destroyed. So that's one thing we're going to have to do. And let me test the gun to make sure it works. Another thing is an issue that I just noticed here, which is that when you go to attach a piece to the ship, the piece that's on your mouse that you haven't attached yet has a collider on it, so it bumps the ship around, nudges things in all kinds of directions, makes the physics bug out. So while things are being placed, we need to turn off their collisions. So that's going to be part of the logic for the shipbuilder. So when we begin adding a piece, we're going to instantiate it. we're going to get all its colliders and turn them off. So, does get components in children return components on the parent object itself? I'm going to Google it. Get component in children. On the same game object as the component specified or any child of the game object. Okay. It sounds like it returns the object and children. They really need to name this better. Gets references to all components of type T on the same game object as the component specified and any child of the game object. Okay. So we call get components in children collider 2D. Disable them. These are collider 2Ds. I keep screwing up the 2D versus 3D references here. I'm just going to keep making that mistake. All right, so when we begin adding the piece and then when we end adding the piece, attach current piece. Add the piece to the ship. Then re-enable colliders on the piece. I don't know if this is going to nudge the ship. I don't think it should, because I think it's getting childed. I think in add piece it's getting childed to the object, so if we enable the collider after childing it on, it shouldn't nudge the ship around or mess with the physics. Pretty sure. So, gun, attach gun, gun, attach gun. Nice. Seems to not be... Oh. That almost worked. Looks like it's not getting turned back on properly. Oh. Huh. All right. It's not getting the colliders because they're turned off. I think there's a... Yeah. Include inactive true. It was turning the colliders off and then it wasn't turning them back on because it couldn't find them because it was only finding things that are on. So it was turning them off and then losing them forever. This should do it. Gun on. Gun on. Still not doing it. These still disabled? Yep, still disabled. Why would that be? Include inactive. Oh, because I'm disabling instead of enabling. Just a stupid error. All right, this should do it now. It's disabling the piece and then disabling the piece again. Let's go gun, attach, turn. Nice. Look at that. Little flashes. Shoot me. Shoot me. Beautiful. All right. So that's working. Now, instead of pieces just getting deleted when they run out of health, we need to put some smarter destruction effect in there so that we can do things like trigger animations, update the ship configuration if a piece of the ship gets destroyed, all that kind of stuff. So, I think the damageable component should have an event here. Which is going to get triggered when the thing is supposed to be destroyed. So I've used events so many times, but I always have to Google the syntax to remember. Because you can do Unity events or you can do C# events. Unity events are a little more concise, so I like using them. Let's see. Scrolling through some examples here. There we go. Public event. I think this is part of the Unity. So these can take in any value. It's a different version of... Okay. Slightly confused about... I guess the non-generic version of this method is in a separate package. I'm a little confused about that. But we'll see if this behaves as intended or not. So we have this onDestroyed action. And instead of destroying the game object, we'll say if there's anything listening for this, then we will invoke it. Is there a way to check if there's any listeners? So this is interesting. I could say if anything's listening for undestroyed, send them a message, otherwise destroy myself. So effectively have like a default behavior. But that feels a little messy. Like it's going to lead to confusion later when I forget that that's how I set it up. So let's just say let's just have a Boolean called auto destroy self. And do that. Okay. Oh, interesting. Damageables were automatically triggering when other things enter their zone. I don't think we want it doing that. It might have been double counting damage on some of these instances. So let's see if everything still works as intended. Ooh, okay. So this was something I called out earlier and then I forgot about. So lasers are instantly hitting their own source, and we don't want that. So there's a couple ways to address that. It's because the laser is being created slightly inside the gun, and so as soon as they are fired, they hit the gun itself. So we don't want that. There's a couple ways to deal with it. One is to turn off friendly fire and have our friendly lasers be on a separate layer so that they never collide with our ship. Another way is to somehow enable them after they exit their source collider. And it's possible that there's some setting within the rigid body that we can make it not collide with anything that they're instantiated inside of. I don't know. Not sure what the cleanest way to do this is. I also still want the asteroid and the diamond to destroy themselves when they get destroyed. Auto destroy self. Let's fly over behind them. Are they still getting blown up as they're supposed to? Yeah, they are. That felt like it got destroyed in like one shot, didn't it? Yes, it did. Why is that? Because they have 10 HP. Here we go. I put the destroy method call in the wrong location. It was just doing it every time they get hit, which is not what we want. So that's fixed. Now they should have 10 health. Should take quite a few shots. Thought that was 10. Are those things not dying at all now? Interesting. Oh, okay. The green lasers have 0 damage value. Okay. That would do it. Just hitting things forever without ever destroying them. Pew, pew, pew. Got it. Okay, cool. That worked. Need to AFK for one more sec. Refill my coffee. Alright, so there's a little bit of a decision point about how to make lasers not hit their own firing source as soon as you shoot them. I was thinking about it. I wonder if there's a way... There's multiple ways to address this, but I wonder if there's a way to tell bullets to ignore a specific collider. So it would be cool when you instantiate a bullet to tell it that it just can't hit its own gun. But I don't know if that's a thing you can do. What you need to do is tell the object the script is attached. So what I could do is say, I could tell the bullet to ignore a specific collider, because this is all working with triggers. So I can tell it, so what I can do is I can tell it to ignore an object, and I'll just have a list of objects that we don't pay attention to. If we're telling it to ignore, then we add the ignore object to our ignore list. If it's not already on the list. Let's do this. Else, move from the list, add to the list. And then if that list does not contain the object that we hit, then we go ahead and do all this logic. Okay, so if we enter a trigger of something that's not on our ignore list, we do all the logic that happens when we hit something. And then the one other thing is pulse laser. Let's look at that gun component. Get the bullet component off of it. Tell it to ignore self. So if the bullet collides with an object that's the same object it was fired from, it should ignore it. I'm a little suspicious this might throw an error if that awake method doesn't get called immediately on instantiate, but we'll find out. Gun, boom, gun, boom. Nice. All right. Bullets no longer hit their firing source. That was actually pretty easy. And it means that we could have friendly fire now. So if I like loop around and have my gun fire at me, I can hit myself. Interesting. I never seem to die. I don't remember if I set a health value. Ooh, interesting. So I'm noticing that this feels different. I am noticing that this feels different because the ship is getting more massive as I add things now, which makes sense. Because I added colliders to all the pieces I'm putting on. So when I'm adding blocks now, it's getting slower and slower to rotate. I know you can't tell that by watching, but when I try to rotate the ship now, it's all heavy and slow. Let's pause and look at the ship layout and how it's being built. So these parts each have just a collider. Interesting. The mass isn't being affected. So why am I turning very slowly now? Ooh, it's like very cumbersome to turn. Is that still the case when I'm just one tiny piece? Or is that scaling with how big I am making this object? No, I can turn very easily when I'm small. And then when I get bigger, it gets harder and harder to turn. Like the object is getting more massive. But the odd thing is, what I don't understand, is that the object is not getting more massive. Definitely feels more massive. Like my turning force is turning it less and less the bigger it gets, but why is that? Because the mass of the overall ship is still set to 1. I'm adding colliders to it, but the colliders, interesting. I don't think the whole game is slowing down because the lasers are still traveling at normal speed, right? Yeah, they are. Okay, so something funky is going on with the physics in the background, and I don't understand it. It's not behaving like I expected. So I'm going to try to figure out why. And it feels like the thrust... Is thrust being affected or only the rotation? It's like there's a lot of resistance to rotation. But the thrust still feels about the same. So it's not the mass of the ship. It's that for some reason the more of these segments I add, the more resistant the ship is to turning. But not to other forces. Because like I can still tap the thrust a little tiny bit and it goes pretty fast. But turning is like super cumbersome. So why is that happening? That is odd. Does changing colliders affect rigid body physics? The rigid body uses the colliders to figure out where its mass is located. The amount an object spins for a given torque is a function of its mass and physical dimensions. Rigid body.inertia tensor rotation is calculated from the collider, but you can set it yourself. Okay, so the more spread out the object is, the less torque is going to affect it? That is odd. I would have thought that would be just solely tied to mass. But maybe it applies the torque like right next to the center? What happens if I connect way, way far out in like one direction? Learning things about physics here, or at least about Unity physics. So let's go way, way out in one direction. Sure, gun, why not? Does it like spin funny now? Is this pivoting around a different part? Okay. Odd. So when I rotate the ship now, it's like rotating around a different location. Let me see if there's any settings on the rigid body that simulated Use auto mass. Oh, that's pretty cool. You can tell it to automatically update the mass. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Huh, cool. You can make it automatically get the mass of whatever is attached to it. Constraints, info. World center of mass, inertia. Man, rotation is very difficult. Velocity, rotation, position. Okay. I'm going to turn off this annoying enemy for a minute while I'm testing this. Rotate. Okay, so the center of rotation moves over to here. So our rotating force is pivoting around this spot now. Yeah, see, we're centered right here, but we start off centered right here. So when I'm applying this torque to the rigid body, it's spinning it around the center of gravity, not around this central object here. Okay, so it seems like both the thrusting force and the rotation force are actually originating from the center of gravity, not from the center of the parent object. So that's good to know. That's going to affect how we want to implement this ship behavior. So, what do we do with this information? Is trigger used by effector, used by composite? Can we turn off for now these rigid bodies? Whether the collider can be used by an attached composite collider or not. Whether the collider is used by an attached effector or not. Okay, the individual colliders have their own physics parameters. So I think now that we have the shape of our ship updating all over the place, that we need to update how we're applying the torque force when we're steering. So let's work on this. So there's a larger question of just how rotation should work with our ship. Rigid body dot inertia tensor rotation. That's what the internet says to look at here. So let's look at the movement logic. what it was, ship controller. All right. Apply limits. Apply rotation forces. First of all, let's see what add torque takes in. Force mode 2D, huh? What do those do? How to apply a force. Add an instant force impulse or add a force. Huh. What's the difference? Force treats your force input as force per second, whereas impulse treats your force input as force per time step. Okay, so this just changes what it all scales by. That's not anything I care about, so... Can we just manually set the inertia? Inertia tensor rotation is what the forum said to look at, but that's only a thing in the 3D, it sounds like. Whoops. What broke there? Something broke there. Connector? Okay. Okay. Connector, let's make it big. Is it resistant to rotation or no? I can't tell if the thing is still happening. Got to attach a bunch of pieces and see how it feels. Okay. So by setting the inertia to a fixed value of 1, we keep being able to rotate like we were before, it seems like. No matter how big it gets, we no longer get to where it's just bogged down. So that actually seems to have solved the problem. You can manually say how resistant it is to forces. So that's fun. Now here's a question. If I make the ship automatically scale its mass, is that going to change rotation? Use auto mass. Boom. 24 mass. So rotation is nice and easy there now. Come on, ship. I'm trying to fly back to where I can see scenery, but it's not working. All right. So if I tell this to use auto mass and I give it a whole bunch of connectors, make it really big and heavy so that its mass is like 20 something. And then I want to rotate. I can still rotate about the same as before because I'm manually setting that inertia value to 1. But it's really really cumbersome to boost then. Okay. So it seems like mass affects directional force and inertia affects torque specifically, which is odd. Because inertia... I feel like inertia is oddly named because inertia should affect everything, like translation as well as rotation, but let me just double check my theory here by setting this to a really extreme value. So I'm setting the inertia to a really low value. 10 hours. Quarter of the way done. I better be a quarter of the way done. All right. So I'm setting the inertia to a super low value. And when I boost, moves a bit. When I rotate, it rotates super fast now. But the boosting is not that sensitive. All right. Yep, inertia only affects rotation. Interesting. Now that I know I'm looking at that variable, let me remove this real quick. It's very odd. And check what it sets the inertia value to automatically. So it's set to 0.16 by default, and I guess that's going up when I connect new pieces. Yep. So by default, it increases the inertia value, which apparently in this context is just its resistance to rotation. None of this works how I would have expected, but it's good to know. Yeah, now the inertia value is really high, can barely rotate, but I can thrust. Okay, so rotation and... So inertia in Unity is like mass for rotation, specifically. Very weird. Oh, interesting. It's also updating this local center of mass and all that. I guess those are updating automatically when I place new pieces. And I could set them to the center if I wanted to always pivot around the cockpit, but I don't think that's how this should work. Yeah, it's moving the center of mass around. So now it's pivoting around this point instead of pivoting around the cockpit. All right. I'm understanding better now how this all works. I think ultimately what we're going to want is for the inertia to scale, but only as a percentage, so that the ship can get pretty big and it'll rotate a little slower, but not like dramatically slower, because right now this feels like if I attach a couple blocks, I suddenly can't get enough torque to get any rotation going. So I think I want inertia to scale up with the size of the ship, but not one-to-one like Unity's trying to do it by default, by some other value. And I think also I'm going to want to have thrust apply at the location of the thruster, so that you have to care about where the thrusters are located and how balanced they are, because it feels weird when your ship is shaped like this and your thruster's over here that the thruster pushes you straight forward without applying any rotation. So I think I want, at least for now, for rotation to just be kind of a magical built-in thing that just sort of feels right, even though there's no component on the ship that does rotation for you. But I want the thrusters that push you forward to be sort of location based, so that you have to balance them, and if they're off center then it makes your ship fly wonky, which sounds fun to me anyway. Maybe I'll go ahead and add a thruster component right now, actually. Should I do that? I think I'm going to do that. I think I'm going to add a thruster component so that we can put multiple thrusters on the ship and have it affect how it moves. So let's turn our inertia hack back on. And let's make a thruster component. Sounds fun. Start with the connector as a template. Put our little visual effect on it. Why is this offset? That's odd. All right. Thruster. Center this up. And let's make a script for it. At some point I'm going to do some art so that this game doesn't look horrific, but this is fun prototyping with shapes for now. Okay. I'm going to ship controller. I hate putting logic directly into the Unity built-in methods. I always like to separate them out. It's a little extra work when you have a tiny class like this that doesn't have a lot going on, but means you can just have like one method call for each piece of logic in update. Never gets cluttered up with anything else as you add more functionality over time. Okay, so just like on the rest of the ship, we're going to turn on those visual effects only when the thruster is engaged. Give a reference to that visual effect thing. Try force of 1 to start. And snap points. We want it to have, we want this to be able to attach on any of these 3 sides, but not in the down direction. So that's 0, 1, 2, 3. Nothing behind thrusters, nothing in front of lasers. Okay. I think everything's set up there. It won't do anything yet, but it'll have a nice little visual effect, and it should have the building requisites attached to it. So, oh yeah, and I need to add a button to be able to add them. So, let's go do that. Let's make the UI viewable. Let's add a button for thrusters. That will instantiate these. Let's try this. Let's put some thrusters on this ship. Thruster. Thruster. Look at that. Beautiful. 3 thrusters instead of 1. Now, they're not doing anything yet. Though they should be. Nice, and it won't let us build them in the front, only out to the sides. But we could put guns in the front. Look at that. Starting to look like a spaceship. All right. Oh, the guns are hitting other guns. If we're rotating fast enough, the guns hit each other. I think that means our lasers have to move faster. I think that's the straightforward solution to this for now. They should move so fast that you can never really hurt yourself, no matter how fast you're spinning. So, 50? Although, if you have a gun way in the back of your ship and it has to travel in parallel, like if we have a big long tunnel like this, and then, whoops, like this kind of deal, to where the gun shoots like that, then if we rotate, it's gonna hit us even if it's going fast. It's kind of funny when it does, actually. But I think maybe I'll make it go even a little bit faster. I think lasers should go pretty fast. And I think I'm okay with that kind of friendly fire. Maybe we'll make it so that if you're 2 blocks back, there's no way to hurt yourself. There. That's maximum rotation speed. Oh, we hit ourselves once. And again. It only happens once in a while. How about if we make it like... speed of 75? Is that fast enough? That seems to avoid all of the self-collisions, at least to a point. We can still just blast ourselves into oblivion like this. But that is a design problem, a ship design problem for the player. I can make this like 70. So bullets can't hit their own gun, but they can hit other parts of the ship, which makes sense. test this one more time here. So if you have a little firing channel here, yeah, we're still hitting ourselves. Oh, this is another reason to apply the relative velocity of the ship to the bullet as well. Because when the ship is moving fast, the bullets hit us more often. Because they don't inherit the velocity of the ship, and so the ship is traveling really fast, and then the bullets get created at a fixed speed, and then they immediately hit the sides of the ship. I don't know if that's what we want. It's a good question, actually. I'm not going to get into the fiddly aspects of the bullet physics right now. Seems too early for it, but these are all things to think about for later. So these thrusters. Let's do some logic for the thrusters. So we need to get a reference to the ship so that we can have the thrusters apply their physics to it. So on start, let's see. So we want to add a force at the position of the thruster, I think, in the direction that the thruster is facing. So we want to grab a reference to the ship controller. Because there'll only be one of those. No. Find any object by type ship controller dot get component. So we're going to grab the ship controller and then grab the rigid body that's attached to the same object. You only have to do this once. And store a reference to it. So we're going to grab it, store a reference to it, and then on update, apply force. And let's make a method that does that. So ship rigid body. So we're going to add a force to the ship's rigid body whenever the thruster is pressed. The direction of the force. Oh, interesting. The force is automatically going to be applied to the center of mass. So if we want to apply a force out here on the edge, we can't just give it a direction. We have to give it like a position it's coming from, right? There must be some was going to say, there has to be a method to add a force at a position, not just to the center. It's almost like that's exactly how this works. What's relative force? I don't know what that does. Add force at position. The force direction should be in my up direction, and it should be times I think you're supposed to do all these physics calls in fixed update, which I haven't been consistently doing. But let's do it here. Whoops. What have I done? Apply the force in fixed update. Times force. And the position is, I'm assuming this is world position, not in world space, it says. Okay. So it should be a force in my forward direction, in the forward direction of the thruster, and the location that it's applied should be at the thruster's location. Seems pretty straightforward. Knock on wood. We'll see if this behaves as expected. So, whoops. I can fly straight forward like this. Then if I add a thrust, why did I go off spinning into oblivion? Riddle me that. Connector? Boop. Thruster. Why, when I create a thruster? Oh. The thruster is just applying its force in some arbitrary place because I'm not checking if they've pushed a button. I'm just applying the force all the time as long as the thruster exists, even if it's not attached to the ship. Not what I want. Times, put ticket axis vertical. Let's try this. You know, this is a good point. I also just realized that the gun probably shoots before it's attached. I think all of my components do things before they're attached, and that needs fixing. I'm gonna have to turn off the logic on each of these pieces until they get attached. Yeah, look at that. It's kind of funny. Okay. I think I also screwed up the inertia on the ship because the value I'm forcing it to is set too high compared to what it used to be. So I'm going to fix that while I'm thinking of it. The ship is not handling like it used to. Let's cut that inertia. Inertia or inertia. Cut the inertia down a little bit. All right, so let's try this thruster thing again. I can thrust. Then if I attach another thruster, now I spin a bit because that middle thruster is not actually doing anything. If I attach a lot of thrusters all on the same side, I will spin a lot. If I balance the thrusters, I will go forward. Look at that. Perfect ship, just giant broadside of guns and thrusters. Okay, cool. So the thrusters are working. And they certainly make the ship go faster. So I think now I need to make that middle cockpit piece actually apply some thrust. Because I'm sort of faking it right now. But if it doesn't apply any thrust, then when you add like something like this, the whole ship should go forward, but instead it's tilting to the left because that center thruster is not actually applying any force. So this should be a balanced ship right here that just goes forward, but it's spinning instead because there's a fake thruster. So I need to make that one actually function. I'm gonna AFK a sec. Ooh. All right, I'm back. Sorry. I lost my dog, and I went calling for him, and it turned out he was just sleeping in a weird place. And then he's staring at me like, why'd you wake me up? So, right. The thrusters are working pretty well. I like it. I do think I need to change a couple things here. So first of all, let's change the cockpit to just be called the cockpit. And let's have this just function exactly like the thruster does for now. Fixed update, apply force. Apply a lateral force. From the center of the cockpit position. Let's do that. Whoa. Ooh, that's still a lot of force. What is happening there? Ah, my lateral force is way too high. Look at how fast I am. Oh, this feels crazy. It's like a super thruster on a tiny ship. All right. One. Lateral force 1. I think that's what I have it set to on the... Okay, now that feels way less powerful than the other thrusters. Let me test something real quick. If I attach another thruster, does this thing spin now, or are they applying the same amount of force? It's a good test for if this is behaving the same way. Put a thruster. All right, it's not turning at all, so those are applying the same amount of force. What that means is it's not enough force. Let's do 5 times the force. Same thing for the thrusters. See how that feels. Still feels a little weak. If I attach more thrusters, it gets more powerful. Then it's very powerful. I mean, if a ship is entirely thrusters, it should go pretty dang fast. And right now, it feels like it's not going pretty dang fast. It feels like still a little clunky, so I think we need more thrust. Let's make these 10. Double the thrust. Yeah, that's got the kind of kick of a ship that's entirely made out of thrusters. How does it feel with a single capsule? When its mass is nice and low. think I may even want this a little bit higher, but I'm not sure yet. Yeah. Because when I attach a couple guns and this thing starts to scale up a little bit, it's like, maybe that's an okay amount of force. I actually attached the wrong piece and screwed up my experiment. I gotta try that again. Give this a shot. Let's just attach some connectors for dead weight and a couple of guns. See how this handles. Yeah, that feels okay. And then how about if I put 2 more thrusters on there? A little more kick. How about when it's just a tiny ship? And I'll do like 2 guns on it and see how it feels. Gun, gun. Okay. I feel like this feels okay. Oh, interesting. Interesting. I'm able to go backwards, which isn't supposed to be a thing. Clamp that value. Actually, no. We want the higher of the vertical axis value or 0, whichever is higher, so that this can't be negative. And this needs to be both here and in the thruster component. Yeah, okay. So if you push the down arrow, it won't thrust backwards. Because that is not desirable. Oh, it's still going backwards. Why is that? What is this getting called? This is an old method. I'm actually double applying my movement forces. I have the old way I was doing it, and then I have the new way that has the thruster, so... This actually explains why this felt a little weird, because it felt like the acceleration was fine from the ship, but then when I put a bunch of thrusters on it, it wasn't quite accelerating as hard as I expected. And that's because the starting thruster that's on the cockpit of the ship was applying double the force that it should, and the other thrusters were doing half of that, so they weren't feeling as impactful as I expected. I think now this is going to work, and then I need to scale up the force values again. Yeah, because this is a little bit low. Thruster, 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 thruster. Yeah. There we go. So now I want to do lateral force. Let's do 15 on the cockpit and on the thruster objects. I think this should finally feel okay. Let's give it a try. I realized my mic was a little far away. I've probably been quiet. Okay. Yep. That feels like a ship made entirely out of thrusters. Very fast. Darting around. Get out of here. And then if I stick some guns on it, it'll make it a little bit heavier. It's still pretty good. Thanks, Windows. And if I put off-center thrusters, I pretty much lose the ability to steer. Which is just great. I kind of like that, actually. So if our ship gets damaged, it might get very difficult to control, which is funny. And it means that the location of the thrusters makes a difference in how the ship behaves, which is also cool. It means if they're way out on the outside versus where they are on the, like if you put them right in the core next to the cockpit, it'll change how much rotation they add. Like if I do connector, connector, thruster, connector, 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 thruster. Yeah, so like now these are now these are off center, and so it makes it all very wonky. Oh god. I like it. So the cockpit does apply some amount of steering force to the ship. This is really funny. Let's beef up the ship a little bit and make it heavy. It's fun just sort of playing with the physics. So if I apply some, the left and right arrow keys right now apply some steering force to the ship, which is just sort of hidden. It just works magically. But it's possible that we want some visual representation of it, and maybe to put a little bit more control on there for it. It's also possible these thrusters are a little too strong right now. Because the ship changes its orientation very quickly when there's an off-center thruster, and it makes it really impossible to control. So we might have to tone them down a little bit. Like this, you can't even counter steer enough to get this thing where you want it. I'm going to tone all these down to like 12.5 from 15. And stop messing with movement physics for a bit. There's lots more to be done with movement physics, but I think it's time to move on to some other features for a bit. Ugh. Okay, yeah. Now if you have an off-center thruster, you can at least counter-steer it a little bit. It's a lot easier to control these with it toned back a tad. Let me test one more thing here. It seemed like maybe it was trying to spin a little bit. If I set the thrusters off center, does it spin in place or does it go straight? Go straight. Okay, cool. So the forces are balanced. All right. There's a lot more to be done with ship control, ship movement. I think another thing I would like to do is to not center the view on the cockpit, but center the view on the center of mass of the ship, so that when you create these crazy asymmetric ships with the cockpit off to one side, like say a Millennium Falcon, it'll center the ship instead of just centering on the place, instead of centering on the cockpit spot. So gonna make those adjustments later as well. But for now, what should I do next? I've lost track of what I was doing. Oh yeah, I was doing damage to ship parts before I got off on this whole wild ship physics goose chase. I got totally sidetracked into this other task. I was going to do damage to ship parts. So let's turn back on our enemy. Get him shooting at us. Pew, pew, pew. Do these ever destroy? No, they don't. Okay, cool. So we're detecting damage to ship parts, and I think the ship builder logic, every time a piece is added, it needs to listen for that piece to be destroyed, and if that piece is destroyed, it needs to update everything. Update the ship, destroy the pieces, play nice fancy little explosion effects, all that fun stuff. So every time a piece is added, we need to start listening for it to be destroyed. Where's ship piece? Do I just have too many things open here? Build piece. It's called build piece. Yeah, I don't have that open. No, it's damageable. What am I talking about? Damageable component is what sends up the event. Can action have a game object as a parameter? Looks like it. Can it have anything as a parameter? Looks like it. Oh, nope. Okay. Let's do this. Does that work? Cool. Lets me do that. So when a piece is added to the ship, we need to listen for that piece to get destroyed so that we can trigger logic to react to that. So attach current piece. We add the piece to the ship, turn off its snap points, enable its colliders. Actually, I think this should be in the ship logic, not in the ship builder logic. Or should it? I've sort of got things split between a couple classes here. Build slots, boundaries, cockpit, visualize build area. Okay, it should go in the ship class, I think. I would like the logic that doesn't directly relate to placing and attaching new pieces to be in the ship class, not the ship builder class. So ships taking damage should be in the ship class. So when a piece is added, where are each of these called from? Duplicating logic here, which I shouldn't be doing, so I'm going to clean this up a little bit. Slot.build piece equals piece. Yeah, okay. I've got like some logic here and some logic here that are duplicated. I need this method to just call this version of the method so that I only write all this logic once. Now, when a piece gets added, gets put in the ship, get component damageable. If the damage controller is not null, so if the piece is damageable, basically, handle piece destroyed. Here we go. First, I'm going to just do the dumbest, simplest version of this, just to check that everything's getting called properly and working. Then I'm going to add the logic in here that's all the things that should trigger when a piece of the ship gets destroyed. So, let's give it a test. Let's give our little enemy something to blow up. Thrusters on here. Let them shoot us. There it goes. Nice. Other side. Ooh, we got nudged a little bit. We're starting to move. Cool. Cool. Seems to just be emptying out the build slots so I can reuse them. I wasn't sure if anything was going to cause that to break. Man, it is so hard to control ships when your thrusters are all wonky. If you're even one thruster off center, it's like totally impossible to control. Oh, that was 2 off center. No, that was 1 off center. Because there's 1 on this side and 2 on that side. I am drifting. Swifty drift. That'd be a good handle. Actually, that'd be a good title for this game. So yeah, we could put thrusters on the ship. We could put guns on the ship. Oops, that's a connector. Guns on the ship. Balance out the weight. There we go. Yeah, it is very hard to control the ship if the weight is not balanced. If you get even like one of these pieces destroyed. Okay, so I'm gonna let the enemy shoot a piece off of me. Ideally off of my butt. Shoot me in the butt. Come on. Oof. Gotta fly back. So right now, oops. Man, this is tough to control. Right now, if a piece gets destroyed, there. We just have a hole in the ship, which makes no sense, because now there's pieces just floating. So when a part of the ship gets destroyed, we need to check if anything's been disconnected, like this gun here, and they need to just fall off and blow up as well. Then we need to put a little visual effect on things getting destroyed so that it looks cool. Swifty drifting. I need to update the current task here. I didn't even see that that was you, Amy. I didn't see the name. I thought you were just a rando. Swifty drifting it shall be forever. You get full credit. It's not going to be Swifty drifting forever, but working title. So, man, these thrusters got some punch to them. So, when a piece gets destroyed, we need to update a lot of things. Where did this go? Ship. Handle piece destroyed. This is not good enough all on its own. We have to undo everything that gets done in add piece, which means gotta get a reference to the build piece. Got to clear out its slot. Clear out its slot, and then remove it from all of our data structures. Destroy it, and then evaluate ship integrity. So this will be the method that checks if any parts of the ship are now detached and need to be destroyed. So the way we do this is we need to start at the cockpit, flood fill out through all of the portions of the ship, and check if they're attached or not to create a collection of all of the attached parts. Then we need to go through all of the ship parts, and if they're not in that attached collection, kill them. So start with the cockpit. New hash set build piece. Okay. Start with the cockpit. And let me think how this should work. Algorithms. So we need to start with the current piece. Looking at an example of a flood fill algorithm here, I think it needs to be a recursive thing. Okay. Okay. And I think we need to collect references to all of the attached pieces. So In C#, if you want to pass a collection into a method, you do it by ref. Value type passive method argument will be copied. I don't remember the difference between ref and out. Ref and out keywords in C# are used to pass arguments within a method or function. Both indicate that an argument is passed by reference. By default, parameters are passed by a method to a method by value. By using these keywords, you can pass parameter by reference. Okay. What's the difference? Woo! There's a table of differences. Ref means the parameter argument must be initialized first. Out is not compulsory to initialize it before it is passed to an out. Okay. Ref, it's not required to assign or initialize the value. Out, a called method is required to assign or initialize the value of a parameter. Okay. So far, ref is what I want. Useful when multiple values need to be returned from a function or method. Okay. From the called method to the caller method. Sounds like I want ref. Man, the distinction between these is pretty slim and finicky. Both ref and out are treated differently at runtime, and they are treated the same at compile time. Properties are not variables, therefore cannot be passed. Okay. I think I can ref that, so that'll let me modify that hash set. Okay, so start with our cockpit. Do ref here as well. Okay. So this should be pretty simple, actually. So for each piece, we add the piece to the attached list. And then is it, let's see. For each build slot that's adjacent to the one that we're looking at, for each neighbor, if slot is not equal to null and slot dot Okay, so if there's a slot in that direction and the slot is not empty, and the collection doesn't already contain the piece that's there, so we add the piece that we're looking at to the collection of attached pieces. Then, for each build slot adjacent to it, if the slot exists and has a piece in it, and that piece is not already added, then we are going to add it. No, then we are going to check piece integrity on that piece. And pass it our collection so that we can keep adding to it. Then after to the ship to a collection. So first, we create this empty collection, and then we check the integrity of the cockpit, which recursively calls to check the integrity of all of the other pieces. And then once we've flooded through the ship and checked all of the connected pieces, we can do for each in attached pieces in build pieces. Then we go through all the build pieces in the ship. Oh, dot values, because it's a dictionary. So for each build piece in the keys. Okay, so we start with the cockpit, we flood through the whole ship and make a collection of all the pieces that are attached. Then for each of the pieces in our ship, if that piece is not in the collection, let's do this the dumb way first just to test it. Destroy that piece. So now, if part of our ship gets blown up and it leaves pieces detached, they should automatically get destroyed. Let's test if that's working. I'm actually going to first turn off this turret enemy so that I can turn him on when I'm ready to get shot at. Add a connector, add a connector, add a connector, add a connector, add a gun, add a gun, add a gun, add a gun. Pew pew pew. Fun. Let's turn on the enemy. Whoops. Turn it on. Shoot me. So if this destroys one of these, whoops, spun too far. There we go. So if one of these blocks gets destroyed, it should, well, they're never getting destroyed. Oh, it threw an error. All right, cool. Set the parent of the build slot. Why did that break? Something broke that hasn't broken before. That I can remember. I'm going to try to see when that gets thrown. Connector? 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 Gun. Gun. Alright. Does that get called as soon as the enemy starts shooting at us, or as soon as something should be destroyed? I didn't catch when that error happened. Okay. Looks like when the piece is supposed to get destroyed, this is getting called. Handle piece destroyed. Build pieces. Slot.build piece. What is the error? The build slot does not have a build piece in it. Oh, we're trying to assign a null build piece into a slot. Why are we doing that? Oh, I see. If I'm nulling it out, I don't want it to try to set transform attachments. That was all it was. Just a dumb oversight. Come on. Whew, compiling is getting slow for some reason. Alright. Oh, the game was still running. That might be why. Alright, let's test this again. Add a connector, add a connector, add a gun, add a gun, connector, connector, gun, connector, connector, gun, pew pew pew. Let's turn on the enemy. Shoot me, enemy. Oh. Break a piece, please. Boom, look at that. Broke a piece, and we took that whole chunk off of the ship. Love it. All right. Nice, nice, nice. And we end up with a nice wobbly ship. Ooh, that was an interesting bug. We're still showing all of the old build slot. Oh, it's because I didn't properly remove the pieces that got destroyed. I know why that's happening. Cool. I'm actually about to go take a lunch break, so I'm gonna make a giant note to self. Remove these properly. Put that on the to-do list. All right. I've been streaming for pushing 3 hours. I'm getting hungry, and I need time to noodle on code things. So I'm going to go do lunch, and then I will come back and stream some more. So thank you for watching. And